What is going on, everybody? We're here back on Supercross 4 for my bike setup guide, tutorial, whatever you want to call it. I'll be going over the 250 and the 450 in this video. Really quickly before I begin, I just want to say that I would say skill comes before the bike setup. If you are not very good at the game or you just can't really get the hang of it yet, put more practice into it and then worry about a bike setup, because a bike setup will not make you go that much more faster if you aren't very good at the game. I just feel like you have to be more better at the game before you pick a bike setup, because you might not notice much of a difference, or you're just gonna think that if you use somebody else's setup that you're just gonna go so much quicker, which probably won't happen. My setup might not work for you. Other people's setup on YouTube might not work for you. It's all really about personal preference. My setup definitely leans more towards agility instead of balance. And again, I'm not saying that this setup will work for you or it's a good setup, whatever. This is just what personally works for me. Again, don't listen to anybody on YouTube if they're going to be like, my setup's good, use mine, don't use anybody else's. Just use which one works for you. I'm going to show you guys my setup and my tutorial here, my guide. So let's just get right into it. Off the bat, you can see there's a lot of information with these bars, with the suspension and all that. Don't really pay too much attention to all the words. There's just a bunch of dumb bullshit they put in there. Just worry about if it says if you lower the suspension, that it will make it more stable instead of agility or more agile. That's all you really need to be paying attention to. If you want the bike to be more agile and turn better, all the bars are going to be ticked in the positive side towards the right, except the top one, which is the opposite. You want to tick that one to the far left if you want it to be more agile. Don't worry about choosing which bar does what, because at the end of the day, in my opinion, you don't notice a difference. But if you change this bar or that bar, I think they all kind of don't serve their own purpose. It's just, if you want the bike to turn better, do this, tick it up. If you want the bike to turn less, tick it down. My setup is more towards agility and turning. I find when you have it to be set as more stable, the bike just feels way too clunky in the air and in the corners. You don't notice it a whole lot in the 180 berm corners, but everywhere else the bike just feels way too clunky and just feels like it turns like a goddamn boat. So I would recommend your setup being more agile. So I have two setups here. Here is my first one, and then I'm not really too happy with this one anymore. I like to use this setup right here. I just called it Texas because I did it on the Texas track, but it works for me on every other track pretty much. So when you're choosing your suspension for 250s and 450s, honestly, just keep them the exact same for whatever bike setup you have, because in my opinion, from what I've noticed, the setups from the 250s and the 450s are pretty much the same when it comes to suspension. So if your suspension for your 450 is whatever it is, just keep that for your 250 and it should feel pretty much the exact same when turning and all that. When it comes to your transmission for the 250, do not use long. It's really between short and medium. I find when I use long, you just bog way too much, especially when you're even in second gear or even in the whoops in like fourth gear. It's just not, I would not recommend using long for the 250 or the 450, but it definitely does not work very well with the 250 in my opinion. In Supercross 3, the short gear ratio was the way to go for these 250s, but in Supercross 4, I think medium transmission works a lot better. I just find that when you are using short transmission, you lose your speed way too quickly coming out of corners. You do have to shift a lot more, but like I said, you just lose your speed way too much coming out of corners, and I feel like you can't hit those big lines. Even if you mess up a rhythm section or something like that, I find shorter gear ratio doesn't really bail you out as much if you're trying to save yourself or whatever. That's why I prefer medium transmission, because you can keep your speed in the corners very well, and it also bails you out of rhythm sections and saves you in case you mess up. And you'll be able to get those bigger lines a lot easier on this 250 in medium transmission. So I think for the 250s, medium transmission on most tracks is preferred, but you may prefer short. It all is about preference. When it comes to the 450, again, I wouldn't recommend a long transmission, but it works a lot better for this bike than it does for the 250. I just find that when you're in long, you just bog again way too much. So for me, it's between short and medium again for the 450. On certain tracks like Glendale, I would highly recommend medium transmission because that track is way more fast. I find it really bails me out of a rhythm section if I mess it up, and it really helps me get those big lines a lot easier. And coming out of corners, again, I just feel like you don't have to shift as much when you're in medium, and it really shoots you a lot further, I think, because you just lose way too much speed and short transmission in this game, coming out of corners and stuff like that, and down the straights. So I would recommend using medium for both the 250 and 450, but it's definitely between short and medium for me. So I would recommend using medium transmission for both the 450 and 250, but it's between short and medium. Either one of them works really well, but for me personally, I prefer medium. And then again, suspension and all that, I keep it the exact same between both bikes just because I don't think it makes a difference at all, really. It's pretty much the same. So yeah, that is my bike setup and my bike setup guide tutorial. Let me know if it helped you out. Let me know if my bike setup sucks for you or if it works really well. Again, you might not notice too much of a difference at first or at all, especially if you're not very good at the game. You might not notice a difference at all, but I find the better player you are, the more you can really notice in this game. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. But again, let me know what you think of this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.